There's one more button I had to hit. Okay. So I'll have to do that introduction again. Sorry, guys. There's one more button I had to hit. There we go. Okay. And I'm hearing my own audio. So I'll have to do that introduction. Yes. All right. Back to Zoom. We'll do that introduction again. Sorry, everybody. I did not hit the go live button. We are live now for real. Yes. So please welcome from Japan, the team from Miracle Bus and Plug Note, Masaru Yokoyama, who was the composer that we connected with, who helped produce the library, the entire recording production side of the library in Japan, because our team was not able to physically be there. He's a composer himself, and with extensive experience, not just using virtual instruments. In fact, you were featured by Native Instruments, I think, in a blog post recently in a video, which was cool. But also recording orchestras in different places. So it was really interesting to compare, like when we were picking the studio and figuring out like what kind of sound we wanted. His experience was essential for that. So, and Ryo Sato, next to him with the glasses, was responsible for really running the sessions in terms of running Pro Tools, communicating with the musicians, translating from when we were talking in English, anybody from my side, and basically was the person that was there anytime I couldn't be there, which was a decent amount of the time because of the time zone difference. So thank you again for that. The sessions are very long and grueling. So, and yes, okay, everybody can see us, which is great. Victor, yes, many of us wanted this tone in a library for a long time. I think that is true for many people. So actually, I have a question, Masaru, for you, which was, if for the kinds of projects that you work on as a composer, like Japanese projects, do you feel like the directors ever had a specific sound in mind, or did they trust you to pick the sound that they want? Like maybe here people would say like they want a Hollywood, like Hans Zimmer kind of sound. Do people ever say to you, we want like Hiroyuki Sawano style sound or something like that?
Yeah, so actually sometimes the Japanese director want me まあでもそんなにないか。So yeah, depend on my side. So I can decide what kind of string sound need us. So I think the composer can decide it, and yeah. So actually, it's depend on music style. So
okay.
yeah. So I think the composer, especially me, so sometimes I really want to 欲しいのなんだろうな、そのなんていうかな、正確なフレーズってなんて言えばいいの？accurate phrase. Accurate phrase. So accurate phrase. So でそれはとても日本のストリングスプレイヤーが向いている。
It really depends on the music style. He's saying that when he wants a very accurate playing, he would generally go to Japanese strings, and when he would want like an emotional big sound, he would go to some other non-Japanese strings. And he basically he can make the decision on what kind of strings that he wants. The directors don't generally give him a direction that it has to be this kind of style, but
that's nice to have the flexibility.
He basically has the decision making.
So
I think
it's So it's the reason to 使い分ける.
That's why there's no one best string that could be used for everything. It depends on the style, and he chooses depending on the music that he's writing to at that time.
I think it's nice when you have the flexibility from a director or whoever is in charge of the project, if it's a game or TV show or something like that. And I think from my perspective, what people really like about the Japanese string sound is I think it's like the space. That's the first, when I talk to people, they were saying it's just the tone is different. And I think it's probably because of the size of the halls in general. There, like the studio spaces just tend to be a little bit smaller. The studio we recorded at Sound City, in your experience, is that that's one of the bigger ones, right? As far as recording spaces. Yeah.
SoundStage is the maybe biggest one in our country.
So it's just interesting, like if you've used the library, if you've heard any of the demos, like it sounds, compared to like a East European hall, some of those have like 3-4 seconds of reverb. So it's such a night and day difference, in my opinion. Like the reverb tail is the main thing that people immediately hear with Tokyo scoring strings, and maybe other Tokyo scoring series instruments. So Airsick Titan said, with this style of string library, so like with TSS, do you feel like it'll be easier to sketch in this style, like the Japanese string style?
Absolutely. Of course.
That's the goal.
Yes.
And, Brian was saying it blends
yeah.
very well with solo string libraries that he uses. And actually somebody on our Discord did the same thing. I posted a mock-up using TSS, and then they put Bohemian Violin on top. And before the stream started, we were actually talking a little bit about the solo strings. And you were saying you use like Spitfire solo strings sometimes, right?
Yes, we do.
Something that
when we compose string or string quartet song, right. I'm using a Spitfire solo strings library.
So that is probably.
This is the point. So I actually use this solo string library, but so I adjust miking to cross.
I think that was one of the top requests that we've seen people talking about, even though it's been only 24 hours since Tokyo scoring strings came out. They're like, where is Tokyo scoring solo strings? It's like the next thing that people have been asking about. And I think space-wise, I'm sure using the same space would be possible, but there's different challenges with solo strings. That's something that I want to address, just for like people that are curious about this process. That first of all, sampling is very it's hard work for the players, and especially Mr. Muroya, who isn't here on this call, but of course he was at the sessions, and even though he plays violin and viola, he was directing the other sections also, and he played in Violins I, Violins II, and I think he played in violas, right?
Yes, he did.
So it's like you're already getting his sound as part of this, and it's a lot of work to go back and do the solo strings. But I'd say if there's enough, in my opinion, I think it would be nice to get other sections of the orchestra first, so that you can have as many elements in the same space as possible, and then maybe later we can think about the solo strings. That's my opinion. But somebody said every future Tokyo scoring something will be an excellent library. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And any chance for brass and woodwinds? Somebody said percussion is next. We need it. So we can discuss. Without talking about too many specific details or things that haven't been established 100%. We have done some recording of drums. I've talked about that a little bit publicly. We haven't shared any clips, but when we were discussing concepts for the next sections to do, first we were thinking, percussion, but it's less interesting. I think we were saying it's less interesting to do just regular like timpani, triangle, woodblock, right? Compared to like drums. So that's why we were thinking about that direction. In your experience, like how often do you use do you use a lot of like acoustic drum kits and drum ensemble type samples often, or more like traditional orchestra percussion in your own work?
Yeah, so it's different question. So difficult question. So, but yeah. So it depends on music style as well. And so so when I compose a picture, so like Hollywood thing, yeah. So I'm using both of classical percussion and drum ensemble. So maybe sometimes I need cinematic sounds. Yeah, like Hans Zimmer.
Right.
So yeah, so when I use it, so I really need drum ensemble sounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's like this is again something maybe the average person that thinks about like anime soundtrack style. When you go on YouTube and you search for people covering anime songs, often it's like anime opening themes. And if you look at a video of like top 50 anime opening themes, so much like drum kit, drum ensemble style instruments used. And I think that direction, to me, that's why it made sense for us to go there first before doing like the traditional timpani kind of stuff. Also because there's many libraries like that, sort of more general orchestra percussion. But Mr. Aizawa, the engineer, for those that don't know, Mr. Aizawa is, besides being like a very in-demand engineer and the person that did the board mix for Tokyo Scoring Strings, he's also very experienced with like a rock style. And so for the drum library, it's even more so than strings. I think it's going to be a lot of his signature sound. So that was another reason that I think that's going to be interesting. And so, yes, we mean like drum kits. When I say like, we're talking about Tokyo Scoring drums, it's like drum kits, drum kit ensemble, as opposed to traditional orchestral percussion. Maybe someday we could do traditional orchestral percussion too, but to me, it's less interesting, like lower priority. Not to say that we'll never do it, but maybe lower priority. What do you think? A little bit lower. And then,
I think so. So we need drums. So in fast. So so some of taiko percussions.
Yeah.
Yeah, is your library. So Kageyama Taiko is and one of the best choice.
Thank you. Yeah, to address that, the traditional style, like there are taiko ensemble libraries out there, and there's like Tone Hammer first, and then Tone Hammer became 8DO, and those taikos, like I use them a lot, but it's not traditional sound at all. Like it's a big epic hall sound, and it almost doesn't even sound like you hear more of the hall than the tone of the drum. So with Kageyama taikos, or the concept for that was like it should be usable for actual traditional style music, and if you have too much hall sound, you can't take the hall out. But brass and winds also just asked about. So of course, we've been thinking about that as well. there's different challenges with brass specifically, because for brass instruments, the hall or the space has a really huge impact on it. Like just something, I mean, it does for all instruments, but with brass, like the way the sound reflects can completely make it sound just very, very different. So Masaru sent me some examples from, it was basically your own music, right? Brass in different halls, right? So that was interesting because I got to hear like what does brass sound like in SoundCity versus like European halls and things like that. And so the SoundCity style of brass, it is, so of course, it's more of the Japanese studio sound, and it will blend well with Tokyo scoring strings. That's why it's important. But it will sound very different from like Hollywood brass, because that it's just those stages are so much bigger, those halls. So it's something to consider, is that it won't sound like every other brass sound. But with winds, that is, we've talked more about winds than brass, because I think winds will also we'll be able to do some more unique things with that. So again, I don't want to say any names because we haven't started recording anything yet, but we had discussed doing like not just regular wind instruments, but also traditional Japanese winds, and also maybe like tin whistle and things like that. So somebody mentioned like, why aren't traditional Japanese instruments used with Western orchestra anime scoring? But similar to that, in Japanese scores, often you hear like tin whistle and other kind of like ethnic instruments. So for the Tokyo scoring winds, I think we would want to explore that more, combine Western winds with other areas. And do you, so Masaru, do you ever use in your own soundtracks like any non-Western winds? Sometimes.
Yeah. Sometimes. So I'm using this kind of sound. So via native instruments in East Asia.
Yeah, that's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I think so. So this is Andrew. So Japanese composer, so make the brass sound. Our brass sound. So actually, so we use recorded live brass sound in recorded at SoundCity or so some Japanese studio, small studio, small or mid-sized studio. So and so plus, so we mixed Western library like Spitfire or native instruments or audio bureau.
Right.
So
yeah, so we would record it in a smaller mid-sized studio, and then we would mix them with the
layering in, right?
So because sometimes we write よく動くっていうのかな、メロディックなフレーズ。
So we write more of a melodic phrases more than like long notes.
So it's とってもなんていうのかな、動くから結構そのライブラリと生の音をミックスすることによってすごくこうフレーズがはっきりする。
Since we write more melodic lines, not just chordal long notes. So when we mix the live recordings with the synth, it gives more clarity and more clearness to the sound.
That's an excellent technique.
Yeah. So it's a unique point of our music style.
That's the nice thing about any smaller space, is that it's easier to get the sound that can like kind of cut through a little bit. It doesn't get washed out with reverb as much.
Yeah, Mr. Aizawa, so always 悩むってなんだっけ？
何でした？
そのスペースをマッチさせることに対していつも彼は
Yeah, so Mr. Aizawa, he's an engineer that we often ask to mix our music, but he really thinks a lot about how to mix the space, you know, in case we're mixing synths and live sounds. He's always thinking about the space and how to match them properly. It's a difficult task, but
yeah. And well, so there's several questions, and then I want to go back to space for a second because it is, I think with Tokyo Scoring Strings, the mics that are provided, it's different than some other orchestral libraries. But there's a question basically related to Mr. Aizawa, which is the recording chain and processing used while mixing TSS. I don't think we can really technically reveal what he used because it's sort of like signature secret, right? It's
a top secret.
Top secret.
I mean, I can say generally speaking that for the board mix provided, so for the close and room and Decca, like the all mic patch, those signals are pretty clean. So it's basically like very high quality mics, like Neumann style and Earthworks and things like that, with minimal processing. But then the board mix is more processed, in other words. So it's not just the plain mic signal. He did use different outboard gear. And I think what people have noticed, they've posted this publicly, is that it sounds like there's a little bit of saturation on it. It's like a little bright. And so I think that is part of the appeal of the board mix, is that it has that brightness and harmonics to it, like the brighter harmonics. That's probably about as much as we can say. Don't want to give anything away, but it's really interesting though. Like it's a very different style, and that somebody asked on Facebook, on my Facebook page, he said, well, what makes like Japanese strings sound different? And it's the players, it's the space, but also the mixing approach is different too. It's all those things are different. Gregory, how many days did it take to record TSS? Okay, if you want to count the entire process, I did 2 days of prototypes first in Sofia to test out our technique for the scores that we were going to write to make sure the articulations would be good. And then in Japan, it was 10 days, right? Straight. 10, like no breaks, 10 days straight. And each day was 2 5-hour sessions. So it was a marathon. And again, all the credit goes to Masaru Ryo and the Plug Note Miracle Bus in general for managing that, because it was a marathon. Thank you again. And then we went back for one more full day. So basically 11 days total of recordings that are actually available. But I will mention that the stuff that we did in Sofia, we will probably release that in some form, just as a bonus, maybe like for people that bought TSS, just like here's the bonus prototype, because actually we can edit it almost exactly the same way, which is nice because it's the same scores. So we might do that just as like a little bonus for people that bought it. And also plans for Divisi with TSS. Trying to think what library. So LA Scoring Strings has Divisi. There's like 1 or 2 more. Do you ever how much do you use that in your not live recording, but when you use sample libraries, do you ever use Divisi much?
Yeah, so sometimes it's difficult question. So when I compose string line with Divisi, so I'm not touch special thing.
So we don't actually set it up as a divisi, but we do write divisis.
Okay.
It's just for mock-up.
Yes. So when we live recording, when we have live recording, so we do DBZ.
Sure.
So I think it's enough. So because we mixed live sound and recorded sound and mock-up sound.
Yeah. That gives, it's like the layered, rich result. That's the goal. I mean, even pretty sure even Hans Zimmer does that all the time. Like layers in, he can record it anywhere he wants, and he still uses like sample libraries mixed in, which I think is interesting. Yeah, I think the problem with recording divisi for samples is that it makes everything take twice as long. So that's the problem. We had to choose that. We had a spreadsheet of all of the like dynamics, round robins, sections, like chromatic versus whole tone sampling. And so you have a certain number of days and you have to figure out what the priorities are. So I posted on VI Control before we did any recording, and I said, what's more important? Like these articulations, or like, would you rather have a real Violins II section as opposed to like a fake, emulated one? And everybody has different priorities, but it seemed like people really wanted a real Violins II, and they wanted like more dynamics, more short notes, more like legato types. So that was the focus instead of divisi, because if we did divisi, we'd only have basically like 5 days instead of 10 days. So that was our decision-making process for that, basically. Masaru, for you, there's a question about, first of all, do you start your compositions with piano first? Because there's discussion about like scoring piano library, but also just composition-wise, do you use piano first?
Yeah. So I'm starting composition from keyboard. Yeah, sketching. I'm sketching with piano. Just to start when I started.
And then also, do you switch keys during melodic lines?
Yeah.
Like consciously switch keys. That's in I can say that's in the Octopath Traveler soundtrack a lot. In terms of recent soundtracks I've heard, that has a lot of key changes in it. Like right in the middle of a melody, just switching keys. So
僕らがこう例えばメロディーの途中で結構転調することがよく日本の音楽では見られるんですけど、それは意識的にやっているのかっていう。
So yeah, some composers maybe. So my style, I'm not use あれ転調って何ですか？ transpose?
Change key.
Change modulation. I'm not use it often, but yeah, no, of course sometimes I'm use it. I'm using it, and so it's my.
So always when he's changing keys, he does that consciously. But for the other composers, he's not very sure. But as a Japanese music trend, we feel that there's a lot of modulations. But he's not a type. Mr. Yokoyama is not a type that he modulate often. He only minimally change keys, and if he does that, he does it consciously with some kind of a purpose.
That makes sense. Thank you for the detailed answer. And there's also a question about anime tracks in general. Why are electric guitars used so often in openings and endings? Why? I guess that's a kind of general trend, right? Like it's just what is done.
Yes, I think so. So, and so actually, so I'm using the beautiful piano in my song. But so yeah, some of composers use electric guitars often.
I think like for openings, is it fair to say that to get people excited, right? It's for especially like any kind of like shonen or like battle kind of anime. You want people to get like excited, and rock and metal style is really good for that. That's my my opinion on why it seems like it gets used a lot, like the One Punch Man theme song, for example. But it said, would you recommend SHREDDAGE 3? Well, I'm biased on that. If you don't have it, I can send you a copy. Always happy to send that. Would you guys ever plan on making Japanese ghost choir? Oh, like Ghost in the Shell style?
So Kenji Kawai's style?
I think that's probably what they mean. That's what.
Yeah.
That's like Bulgarian style, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think it's very interesting question. So sometimes I like Japanese ghost choir library, Japanese ghost choir. So it's first time to hear that. But yeah, maybe so it's actually so it's a Bulgarian choir style, I think. But so yeah, sometimes so I'm using it. I make this kind of choir, but and sometimes I recorded it in Bulgaria.
Oh, okay. Go to the source.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, we did my the co-founder of Impact Soundworks, who is who consulted with me on just like some of the programming parts of this library of Tokyo scoring strings. He recorded a Bulgarian style library for us 2011. Wow, it was 10 years ago, called Vocalisa, which you can still get at our site. But it's like pretty small. It's only 3 singers per section. So it's not exactly like as big maybe as what Mr. Kawai uses. So that could be a fun project to do at some point. Choirs are always challenging for samples because you have to decide what to do with the vowels. Like you could do just a few vowels and then you could do legato for everything, or you could try to make a word builder. But I think the style of that, the ghost choir style, maybe it doesn't matter what you're saying as much. It's more like the impression it gives. That's my opinion. So maybe it doesn't need a word builder.
Yeah, I think so. But I think it's a very interesting point. So if there is the ghost choir library, so I really want to use it. Yeah, and so maybe I can interview about it to Kenji Kawai. Or yeah, and I'm friend of 彼のいとこ秀弘河合
his sibling, Kenji Kawai's sibling, he's his friend with him.
Okay.
So he can get contact.
Small world.
Yes.
There is also Brian had a question about a patch for TSS that is the whole ensemble as opposed to separate sections. Yes, we are going to do that. So actually, we recorded a little bit of full ensemble, like all together in the same room, but it was more of a sound test. So what we might do, what I talked about with my team, is we might go to the original recordings and just mix the sections ourselves. So if there's a sample of like Violins I, Violins II, viola playing the same note, we'll just mix that down into one sample and then create an ensemble patch that way. So it'll be the same amount of RAM as one section, but it'll be like new samples that are based on mixing the existing samples. So I think that should work because Mr. Aizawa, the way he recorded it is everybody was in the positions that they would be if they were playing in a full ensemble. Which also, it's interesting with SoundCity. If you watch the documentary, and you notice the basses are centered, which is a different aspect about SoundCity because of the way the space is designed. So they're actually supposed to be there. Somebody was like, wow, is that like a style thing? It's like, I think it's SoundCity specifically, he said, right? The bass is being centered. And then also, why aren't traditional Japanese instruments used with Western orchestra anime scoring, but Chinese instruments are often mixed with Western orchestra? That's an interesting question. So with Western orchestra anime scoring. So do you mean like Japanese anime, or do you mean Western anime? I have to have a point of clarification. Also, some people think that there is no such thing as Western anime. I guess that's a debate. Like maybe only Japanese anime can exist.
Yeah, sometimes so Japanese film director ordered me, so don't use Japanese instrument like koto or shakuhachi. So because their character is very strong, too strong.
Okay.
So if I use the shakuhachi or koto or something, so it's very
it's like the overall color of the music. It's like dominated by that single instrument. If it's used, it's too strong. It's too bold. So for that reason, sometimes the director may say, "Please do not use this instrument."
Yeah, that's very interesting.
But depend on the subject. Depend on the anime.
The traditional Japanese shouts library. Japanese shouts. What would that be? Like taiko players, like the way they shout, maybe? Maybe that could be recorded alongside other percussion, because I feel like that's done in some taiko ensembles. Also traditional Japanese music, sometimes there's like vocal parts.
Yeah, it's
drum library.
Yeah, it's so it's a 今年末ってなんていうんだっけ? End of the year. End of the year. So this is the end of the year. So we can sample Japanese shouts in festival of end of the year. Many of play in Japan.
Somebody was just saying Japanese festival instruments would mix well with orchestra. And there's a question for everyone. Are you influenced by a particular composer or specific soundtracks? I will say for me, the whole idea for the project, I think, just the sound of Japanese game and anime soundtracks in general, because I've been playing like the Final Fantasy series and watching many anime ever since. So I don't know if Masato and Rio, if you know this, but basically when in the mid 90s and maybe up until the late 90s, any anime that we got in the West, it was pretty much Dragon Ball Z and Sailor Moon, and that was it. So,
I agree. Yeah.
But occasionally, if you knew how to find it online, maybe less than reputable sources, because this was before like Netflix, some of us watched like Trigun, Cowboy Bebop, Kenshin. And so when I saw those things and heard the scores to anime like that, I was always very interested from that point on, because Dragon Ball Z, they actually didn't use any of the original music when they brought it to the States. They completely redid all of it. So I didn't know what the original score sounded like. But and recent stuff, definitely, as far as games go, Octopath Traveler is high up there. And the Final Fantasy VII Remake, which many of the people involved in this project, like Mr. Muroya, Mr. Aizawa, were involved with that as well. So Masaru, what about your influences?
So I like Yoko Kanno.
Ah, legend.
Yeah, so, yeah, Cowboy Bebop or エスカフローネ、天空のエスカフローネ。
Well, I don't know the English title. It's the Escaflowne.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
the English title.
Yeah.
Yeah,
didn't
so
change it.
very, yeah. So I'm very impressive.
Did you, out of curiosity, did you see the Netflix Cowboy Bebop, which was?
Yeah, of course, of course. I saw it. Of course.
It sounds like unfortunately they did not renew it for a second season, which is a shame. But I'm glad that they got Yoko Kanno to work on it. I thought that was nice. I think they tried to do as much tribute to the original as possible. Oh well. And then,
I think so.
how much influence do traditional Japanese scales and modes have in modern scoring? There's like Hirajoshi, like that kind of scale and tuning.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's difficult question.
まあ、近年の作曲ではどれくらい影響がありますかっていう。
そうね。なくもないよね。なくもない。
It's necessary. We do write it in such a style, and when we do, we would stick to the very traditional scales, but it's very rare that we would get a order to write.
So it's that maybe same reason to we don't use Japanese instruments for our song.
Like too strong of a mood,
yeah.
basically. Okay. That's interesting.
そう似たようなことはなんだペンタトニックとか使って似たようなことはするかもしれない。
But we do add flavors of it, so we don't stick to the very actual defined notes, but we would make it sound like it. We may use a pentatonic scale and use it in a way that sounds Japanese-ish.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. So I'm going to be very interested to see some of the people that are watching and are on the call now. Video are from our partners on the distribution side for Sonic Wire and Krypton Future Media, and I think I'm going to be very interested to hear what the Japanese users of Tokyo Scoring Strings will do with it, like what kind of compositions. I'll be very curious because I know a lot of the Western customers, of course, want to do like anime and Japanese game inspired pieces as well. So what do the Japanese users want to do? I'm very curious. That will be the question.
小泉さんか林さん、聞こえてますか？ソニックアイのユーザーさんでは、なんかどういった音楽のスタイルとか、どういったものを求めているっていうことが多いですか？
そうですね。やっぱりポピュラーソングであったり、その劇版と呼ばれるような、VGM だったりっていうのは一番求められているところかなとは思ってます。
日本のポップ的なものとか。
そうですね。はい。
あとは変わり種で言うといわゆる可愛いフューチャーベースだとかって言われるようなオリジナルっぽいものも最近ありますね。はい。そういういわゆるそう一番好きなスタイル。
Andrew, do you know 可愛いフューチャーベース
I hold on. Let me switch the. I can prove it on stream. I have a.
All right. In the meantime, some user also likes to use Japanese pop music and then like also cinematic sounds, like orchestral libraries.
Yeah, that's funny that would be like pop kawaii future bass. So I love that style.
Yeah. It's really, really popular in Sonic Wire right now.
Oh, interesting. Somebody asked me to turn up my mic. Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, sure. I can turn it up. And there's a question in general about How hard is it to break into the music side of the anime industry? Is it possible for an American to get connected, or is it pretty exclusive? What do you all think? I guess Masaru, you're how many colleagues of yours are American, I guess?
Yeah, it's kind it's interesting question. But so do you know Evan Cole? So yeah, so Evan is one of the composer in our industry, but he's American. And yeah, so Evan is my friend. So and yeah, なんだろうね。
Yeah, he's the composer who wrote for Violet Evergarden.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know that one.
He's a very close friend with Mr. Yokoyama. And yeah, the American, he came to Japan and he's writing for the anime.
Do you think, would it be fair to say you probably need to be in Japan to be part of that industry?
日本に住むっていうのは重要だと思いますか?
Yeah, so I'm not sure, but そんなに it's not important. So for now, so because we can communicate so via Zoom or a kind of thing. なんていうのかな? But so yeah, I actually so it depends on the song. So what kind of song do you write? Yeah, so it's very important. And so you should send the demo for the music director. So
there you go. Yeah, I feel that there's a strong Japanese style that people can recognize, and I think if you can write for that particular style, if it matches, I think you'll get a job.
Somebody mentioned Albert Kim mentioned Kevin Penkin. That's so I know, actually I sent a copy of TSS to him. Do you know him? I think he does some anime work also.
Yeah. Kevin Penkin, そうだね。知ってますか? Yeah, yes, I know Kevin Penkin. So なんだろう、直接の面識はないけど、いろんな周りの人はいっぱい知ってる。
So he doesn't know him directly, but he knows many people who does.
Yeah, of course.
So there's a question about how many Japanese virtual orchestrators are there, because we don't hear much from them in the English forums. I'm assuming you mean like people that use virtual orchestras in general. And I guess that's true because, I mean, the social media is a little bit different, right? So I know Twitter is used in Japan, but I think that there's other like forums and places that Japanese users are more likely to be, right? Than English-speaking ones.
Yeah.
There's is Yahoo still used for like discussions?
Yahoo はディスカッションに使われてます。
Yeah,
not much today.
Not much. So, but so virtual orchestrator ってあれだよね、きっとモックアップをオープンにする人だよね。よくいるもんね。
オープンにする。
なんかポストしてる方がよくいるから、なんかso we have some of orchestrator real some of orchestrator. So of course, so かなとかなんていうのかな、one of the project lead my colleague. Kana Hashiguchi. So she's one of the orchestrator in our industry. So of course, so 彼女得意orchestration が。
Yeah, she's very good at. She's a very good orchestrator.
And so her mock-up is very nice. だけどなんていうのかな、結構オーケストレーションを音にする機会に恵まれてるのかもね。もしかしたら。
オーケストレーションを音にす
る。なんかそのライブレコーディングする機会に恵まれてるからな。
It's a very difficult question because to be a good orchestrator, you need to know how it would sound in live situations. So she's had a chance to record them various live recordings with Mr. Yokoyama as well. So she can write as if it will be live recorded. She can have the live sound in her head. So
that's important.
It's kind of right. So to be 100% virtual orchestrator without having the experience of having live recording experience may be very difficult.
That was as a related topic, the creating the scores for this and figuring out the best way to write them to get it's challenging balance to you have to get notes that can be edited as samples, but if you can't just like it might seem simpler if you've never done it before, because you might think, well, it's just like play each note and then go to the next note and play that. But actually, there's a lot of decisions that have to be made. Like, for example, like the note attacks and emphasis, like what markings are used for that. And for especially for short notes, there's a lot of variation that you can have in the scores. So that's something we had to do a lot of testing before we even started recording to figure out the best approach. And then even during the sessions, there was like discussion about like how to interpret the score. So it's a really important skill, actually, even for something that might seem simple, like playing a scale of notes. Yeah. Here's a question that hopefully will reflect well and impact Soundworks, which is, what are some popular orchestral libraries typical anime composers such as you, Hiroyuki Sawano, Yuki Hayashi tend to use for your MIDI compositions? So hopefully the answer to that a year from now will be, of course, Tokyo Scoring Strings. But aside from that, what are some typical ones that are used, do you think?
So it's
popular.
Yeah. No, well, so when I compose the song, yeah, it's very normal. So including complete 13今使ってたっけ Symphonic
the symphonic strings that's included in complete series.
So yeah, because it's just mock-up.
So in our case, we get to record often, so we don't think strictly about which sound to use.
You're saying Spitfire is probably like universally. We were talking a little bit before the stream about like Spitfire solo strings for mock-up, like, and I think on Sonic Wire, I know that their Spitfires like promoted a lot. I'm curious. There was a Japanese YouTuber whose stream I joined a little bit, and people were discussing like the players, the sample player, and what people liked. What do you think about the Contact compared to Spitfire player compared to Orchestral Tools player? Do you have one that you like and dislike?
前に日本の YouTuber がなんか比較してるのを見たんですけど、例えばそのプレイヤーでこのプレイヤーが好きで、例えば今言った3つ、スピットファイアやコンタクト。
Yeah, I like contact player. So, so it's very normal. Yeah, so なんていうかな、すごくエンジンなんですよね。エンジンがやっぱりある程度少ない方が使いやすいから、なるべくコンタクトには絶対。
For the users, I think how flexible it is very important. But in our case, it's kind of important that it's simple. It's not too much technical thing that we can adjust. So the Contact it's very in a good position. It's not too difficult. It's not too technical. It's a very standard.
Yeah, standard
player that we can use. naturally, and we don't have to think hard about the small parts.
Contactor with complete control player.
Oh yeah.
With too much options, it's kind of difficult.
Right. Yeah, of course we made sure that TSS and we'll do the same for future Tokyo scoring will all be NKS, complete control compatible. It has 8 controller pages, I think at least 8. So people were saying, can you add more pages of controls? I think they said 1 in 20 people that use complete control have like vision impairment. So it's actually essential to have the NKS compatibility to be able to use it. So that's like a high priority, is making things easy to use and make sure that everybody can use the sound. So I like contact also. It's a shame sometimes when there's new samplers that are created and then people have to learn something new for each company. I think it's a little less convenient, but I won't speak ill of competitors, specific players. But Trash Panda, welcome by the way from VI Control. The section sizes for brass and woodwinds, how do they compare to Western ensembles? That's an interesting question. Because you've recorded both. So what about, I guess, brass first? How does it compare?
まずブラスはどんな感じ？
Brass. So, so it's depend on the project. So, so I think brass section size is very normal. 同じだよね。
Size
the size is the same. I think the same. But so Woodwinds is of course. So if we have a lot of budget, it depends on the budget, and so we call two players per one instrument, but it's normal. But so if we don't have enough budget, one player but per one instrument.
Probably strings is the biggest difference on average, just because there can be so many string players, right? You could have like 60 or 80, but like you wouldn't have 8 flute players. Like, makes sense to keep it smaller. So actually in the discussions for the like Tokyo scoring winds, we talked a lot about like solo winds being pretty important. There's a lot of interesting sounds you can get with even just a single player. If they're really good and you're in a good space, then there's a lot you can do with just even a single player.
So our studio, so many of studio in Japan. So we don't have enough space. So, but it's very unique point. So we call one player per one instrument is it's enough. Of course, it depends on the song or depend on the project. But so maybe most of it's enough.
Okay, right. And then I guess the follow up to that was from Albert Kim. Why is it that the brass from like typical Japanese anime soundtracks, why do you think it sounds different compared to Western brass? Like, do you think the players have a different style? I mean, of course, the space, like, for those watching, like, this keeps coming up, like, the space really makes a big difference because of the differences in halls. But we talked about, like, the string players have a different style, and, like, they're very accurate. What about brass players?
Yeah, so it's an important question. So, but so Andrew, do you remember? So I sent you the file.
Yeah.
So recorded at the Japanese studio, maybe Bunkamura studio.
Yes.
Or Nashville.
Yes.
Nashville. Nashville studio. So the space is more, 大体同じだったよね。
I think the space size was generally the same between
Yeah.
the two.
But the prayer is very different. So Japanese prayer is very accurate. But so Nashville prayer is very powerful. roughly. それも大
I
きな。
think, yeah, I think it's how clean they play and how accurate they play. I think for when you write for brass, you would generally want a more strong, powerful sound rather than a clean, organized kind of sound. So I think how they play in the space has a big impact on the overall outcome.
That's interesting. I guess the people also were curious about not from this chat just now, but there are game soundtracks like the Mario games, for example. There's a lot of like big band and like jazz brass, and I'm curious if you ever write or have recorded like more in that instead of orchestral brass, like more big band style, and if so, if you like who you worked with for that is like Japanese players or what, or European or Western.
So the big band?
Yeah, or like even just jazz,
yeah.
like jazz brass.
Yeah, so yeah, so なくもない、まあ少ないけど。
ネメシスとか。
ネメシス、ああ、そっか、そっか。Yeah, so yeah, so I recorded this kind of style. So yeah, I recorded with Japanese musician.
Right.
In Japanese studio. Yeah.
Do you feel like they big band and jazz brass is really hard to it takes a lot of skill. With it, do you feel like they did a really good job with it?
あれ、結果良かったですか?
Yes. なんていうのかな。It depends on the style. So we need. なんていうのかな。
So, yeah, in our case, it was for a soundtrack. So, you know, it doesn't have to be 100% authentic big band sound. You know, it's just emulation. If we can get the overall feel as a big band, it's good. And in our case, yeah, I think the outcome was good with the Japanese musicians.
So yeah, if we need 100% authentic sound, so we should record it in Nashville or New York or. So actually, so I have recorded brass sound in New York, Avatar Studio. So it was very well. It was super nice sound. So very powerful and authentic. But so we don't need authentic style in always. So sometimes so we need some kind of different style. So yeah, so it's very fit to record in Japan and Japanese musicians.
So actually, there's several related questions to this, and this was one thing I wanted to ask as well, which is like what the studying and education process is like. So, for example, is there a different, like, do you as a composer and do musicians study the same like Rimsky-Korsakov and like traditional like 1800s sort of European style music theory, or are there different sort of approaches and different resources that you and like your colleagues studied when you were in school?
Yeah. So yeah, it actually depends on the composer, and so it's まあ僕は 50% of academic and 50% is very pop style. It's my style.
Okay, right.
And so in my experience, so I mean 50% of academic. So it's So I studied harmony in Andy Sharon's style, and I studied Ravel's style harmony and for Gabriel Faure's style harmony. So from my music from my teacher, music teacher, and so I studied in music college, university. So so I studied style of so Rimsky-Korsakov and Tchaikovsky and of course I learned fuga from Bach's invention. But まあそんなに真面目じゃなかった。
But he wasn't very serious about it.
So are there any Japanese books or resources on like harmony specifically?
Actually,
that's the question. Like,
yes, so I had an education in Japan and in the US as well. I think the one unique thing in Japan is that every music school used the same textbook. But Riron it's in Japanese it's called Riron to Jishu. It's like theory and actual practice.
Interesting.
But I think in the US and other parts of the world, I think it's common that each professor or each school has their textbook that they would like to use. I think they're generally teaching the same thing, but they have their own style or methods. But in Japan, everyone used the same text. So everyone who grew up in Japan and in a music education in Japan, they speak the same language and they can understand each other. But when I came to Japan, I had some difficulties understanding and communicating.
Several requests to link or write out the name of that textbook.
Actually, Mr. Yokoyama is just pasting that on the chat.
Okay. That's interesting. I mean, I had no idea. My sister, who worked on some of the orchestration for TSS, teaches at Berklee College of Music, and she uses like many different resources, some traditional and then some all over the place. I think you're right. Like there isn't any one resource. So I had no idea that there was a common one there. So yes.
It's in 3 series, I believe.
Yes, 3 series. So this book. So the roots is in France, Conservatoire in Paris.
The study is based on the conservatory.
Interesting.
The Paris.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I think people are appreciative of the. If you have the link. And then so there's a question or like comment the SoundCity construction. Going back to the tone for a minute, it has a very like distinct sound for the strings, which I definitely agree with. It's a really interesting sound. Actually, everybody was talking about that in the documentary, like interviews, the resonance of it. How do you feel about it? Like the brass and woodwinds, do you feel like it has the same like good character for those sections, or is it? What do you think? You sent. I can't remember if there was an example recorded in SoundCity for brass or if it was just Bunkamura. I can't remember now. But I think for winds, I'm sure it would sound amazing.
Depend on the style. So so Mr. Aizawa always said me. So the SoundCity, A Studio is very なんつうのかな、増強されるリバーブが無理やり。
It says the reverberance is very bold, and that it multiplies on top of each other. And according to Mr. Aizawa, that's the uniqueness of the A Studio in SoundCity.
Right. The resonance, I think, also
Yes,
Mr.
resonance,
Muroya
yes.
was saying as well.
It's not normal.
in a good way, though.
Yes. Mhm.
So I think, if it goes without saying, if for those interested in other entries into the series, that we would want to record in the same space, because for consistency, and also because I think it makes sense to have that sounded just across each section. And a reverb or impulse response based on that. I know how to create impulse responses. We might have to talk with the studio about whether that we're allowed to do that.
Yeah. So we have to negotiate to the studio to get impulse response.
Yes. Yes, for Vancouver's, yes, to be clear on what has and will be recorded, we've talked about brass and winds in the future. Nothing has been recorded yet, but I'm very excited at those possibilities. And then drums, we've already started. We had several days of recording. I think we're probably going to do one more day of recording there, which are and these, to be clear, are like drum kits. So not traditional orchestra percussion, but drum kits, which I think are going to be more appropriate for the kind of like energetic sound that maybe people think about for like rock and pop music. And Tokyo scoring reverbs. That's fun. Do an impulse response at like all the major Victor Studio, Bunkamura, Sound City. That'd be fun. And thank you for the kind words for everybody that talked about the scripting. So just to even talk about that a little bit more. So this is just version 1.0 of the library. We have other plans for improvements and things that we want to do, but we wanted to focus on making sure that the features in the first version were as good as possible. So the next, we're going to release a patch tomorrow with some bug fixes, but the next like major release will actually reduce the RAM amount. So it'll probably be more like 1 gigabyte per section instead of 1.7. So that will be one change that we'll make. And there'll be improvements to look ahead, like features there. And another feature that we want to do is the ability to disable vibrato type to save CPU. So right now, because we have 3 types of vibrato, well, no vibrato, and then regular, and then multi vibrato, it has to play all of those at once to be able to crossfade. So that means every note that you play, it's 5 dynamics times 3 vibrato types per note. So we want to make an option that you could disable a vibrato type, but still be able to blend between the other two. So that's the kind of thing that we want to do, like optimize the CPU and memory more. And if there are other feature requests that people are interested in, that's tell us on Discord, DI control. We'd love to hear. Also for Japanese users, Ryoko, Taka, you can always forward them to me if they have requests. We want to continue supporting this for a long time, basically.
Sure, we will. Thank you.
We will absolutely do that. Is the update going to break custom snapshots? I don't think it should. Maybe. I'm 80% sure that it won't break custom snapshots. Native Instruments, I think, is working on an update. So let me just let me show in Reaper for a second here. So if you go into Contact And you see there's a, let's see here. In the group editor, right? These sections, so the groups and the samples, are currently saved with the snapshots and the modulators. But so if we change a modulator, so for example, if we make this vibrato change to optimize it, it might, if you load an old snapshot, it will load the old groups. But I believe that in a near, like in a contact update that's coming soon, they're going to make it so that snapshots will not affect the groups. And so that's basically the one thing, like, it's annoying with the current snapshot system, is that this stuff gets saved when we just want to save like the user settings, not the groups. So hopefully we can create our update, and then the contact update comes out, and then everybody's happy, and we won't break any snapshots. But 80% sure, like I mentioned. Uh-oh. 1 second. Did I lose? Uh-oh. Hold on a second. There we go. Okay. I lost my Zoom window. Okay. Yeah, so we will... Oh, and there's a question about the legato speed. Yes, to answer that, there is a legato speed option by Velocity. It is on the main page. It's the little keyboard button. So if you hover over that, if you enable this, then when you do a transition, the higher the velocity, the faster the transition. So that is in the current version of the library. And then you can also automate this, the legato speed, with right click. It's CC3 by default. And so the legato speed in look ahead mode, if you click on look ahead, so by default in look ahead mode, that is controlled automatically. So the legato speed in look ahead mode, so when you first load the patch, like you don't make any changes at all, it's based on how close the notes are together. So if you write a run, then it will use fast legato. If you have like a long note and then another long note, it will use slow legato. But you can disable that. And if you disable it, then it's whatever settings you use up here. So whether it's velocity to speed, or your CC automating, or any combination of those things. So that's how we are currently handling the legato speed. Yes, yeah, you're welcome. And so also, I just looked at the time. I think we can, I think I had said originally this would be an hour. So if you have to leave, I'm happy to answer like more technical questions about the library and features, but I don't, for my Japanese partners and collaborators here, I know with the time zone difference, if you have to leave, that is totally fine. Or you can stay until 10:30 our time, so about 10 more minutes. Up to you. Of course. I didn't realize we were past 10. And then there was also a question about more or less expressive with the legato speed. One thing that we want to add in a future version, and this is very tricky, but we want to add some phrasing analysis. So if you write notes in look ahead mode, and so the tricky thing with any sort of MIDI mockups is that even if you get all the timing correct, which look ahead does, if you don't do any automation and you don't use dynamics and you don't use vibrato control, then it can still sound like a little flat. So we want to try to address that problem by having it automatically do dynamics. So like a swell, or start a note with no vibrato. So for example, when a player, when the string players play fast notes, they're not playing vibrato on every single note. They're usually, it's no vibrato during a run, and then they settle into the vibrato on a note. And if you when you listen to real players, that's how they perform. So we want to try to have that behavior in look ahead mode also. It's going to be very challenging to do, but we'd like to do that to help do the phrasing and expression as well. So maybe version 1.2, we'll try to do that. It was something we discussed for version 1, but we decided we want to make sure that we had enough time to do it correctly. So that's why we did not have that in version 1. But yeah. There was one other question I had for Mr. Yokoyama, which is if you could sample anything, whether it's been sampled before or not, I'm curious what's something that you feel like I really wish we had this. Could be any kind of ensemble section, could be electronic. What would it be? Open-ended. For me, well, we actually talked about also with the Krypton and Sonic Wire, there's a concept related to Japanese traditional instruments that we're interested in pursuing, but that will be a separate project later, not exactly related to Tokyo scoring, but yeah, Masato, what do you think? Any instrument of your choice.
Sorry, any instrument?
I was saying if you could sample any instrument or have a sample library of any instrument or sound, like no limits, that doesn't exist, what would you want?
It's very difficult question. So sometimes I need maybe someone said me Ghost Choir Library.
Yes.
So yeah, so my recent work, my latest work named Saiyai, the Japanese dramas, TV dramas soundtrack. So I put theなんて言うんだろうね、choir, like Bjork style, Bjork or Billie Eilish style chorus work.
So it's not clear vocal, but it's breathy and
right.
A unique singing style.
Yeah. So yeah, I know it's it's super difficult to make it, but yeah. So if I can, so I really want to these kind of library.
That would be very interesting. Vocals.
Yeah. I'm gonna send you. I'm gonna send you the song.
Sure. Oh, I'd love to hear. Also, several people have actually said, talking about pianos, and they were wondering if there's a kind of like distinctive Japanese piano sound, and if it's ever recorded in Sound City, specifically. Is there a specific? Actually, I guess maybe a more specific question: is there like a type of piano that is often used, like Yamaha, Steinway?
なんかピアノのユニークさの要素。
なんだろうね。So it's difficult. So yeah, so we use Steinway or Yamaha piano. Sometimes Besendorfer. So.
Is it how's Sound City for the question? Like, can you record piano in Sound City?
Yes. Yeah. Sometimes I recorded the piano in SoundCity. So, まあでもあれスタインウェイだよね。Yeah, SoundCity, maybe SoundCity has a Steinway piano.
I think that's like we've sampled piano before, and the hardest part is actually getting it consistent, because hitting the same note for like 10, 12, 14 dynamics is really hard to do for a player to get it like exactly right. That's, yeah. I've heard that actually using like a robot, like a machine arm, is actually the best way to do it. People have been doing that for a few decades now, like VSL, Vienna did that. That's probably the best way though, because then you don't have to leave it to human error of like, oops, I pushed that one too hard, right? Yeah, piano that's maybe the least interesting in terms of like the recording session for it, because the notes last so long. So you play one note and it lasts like 40 seconds. All right, I don't want to keep everybody too much longer, but there, just to answer one more question. There's a question about, it seems like a lot of Japanese scores sound different orchestrally than most sample libraries. And is it a difference between how you do arrangements or the player's style? Like, what do you think makes those scores seem different in terms of the orchestra style? Arrangement, players?
So it's 書き方かな。So it's the most important point is melody. So yeah, so we have the one of the culture, J-pop and Japanese pop song and Japanese idol song.
Sure.
Japanese idol song. Yeah. So sometimes I'm composing Momoiro Clover Z. Do you know? So Momoiro Clover Z is Japanese idol. So the song has a very unique melody line, and なんていうのかな、too many 音数が多い。
So it's a culture where you have a lot of melodic lines and there's many notes.
Many notes.
The melody is a lot of notes.
That's true. That's a good point.
The musician plays the melody and lots of notes in song, and なんていうかそれに慣れてるからすごくミュージシャンもなんか適応してアキュレートなことに適応してきてる。
So it's very high demand for the musician to be very highly skilled. They have to play a lot of notes. So it's not just chordal slow movements.
Right.
So I think that's one factor that they're very accurate and they can play a lot of difficult lines.
Sometimes it's not natural. It's not natural to the instrument, to the music. So, but it's the point.
Interesting. Yeah, well, that I guess that makes a lot of sense. A lot of the melodies. If I think about like the Hans Zimmer style for like Interstellar, it's like all just slow chords. It's very, very different than that.
I like slow style, but yeah, post classical style. But yeah.
Wait, okay. There's people are saying they did not see the book name in the chat of that music theory textbook. Was that posted, or did they miss that?
I'm sorry. YOASOBI ね。YOASOBI.
Or can you get it on Amazon? I guess is another question.
I don't know. Maybe you can. We can order from Amazon America.
あ、そっか。Amazon アメリカだからか。
YOASOBI. Well, Yeah, I think the string arrangement masterclass. Okay, that can be the last question. Would you ever do any kind of like education type materials, like courses or like a video series or anything like that?
なんか横山さん側でこうマスタークラスとかよくなんか作家さんが
ね、マスタークラスある
やって
ね。
ますけど、
ね、マスタークラスね。ね。so, sorry, I can't say it enough, but yeah. Yeah, I can say.
But in Japan, he does get lectures from maybe schools, just one lecture. Maybe he'll get invited, but as of now, he's not planning to have any classes or courses.
Yeah, but,
well, now at least here you have the demand. So maybe you could go on masterclass.com or Teachable or like one of those sites, make an offline course. You can record it once and then you can sell it for years to come. So that's the idea from the chat.
so, thank you.
All right. Well, people are saying they could listen all day. I don't want to take up any more time. I really appreciate everybody being here and participating. Thank you. I think also we're going to do on the Sonic Wire side of things that there will also be a Japanese live stream on the, I think we were saying like on the 15th or something like that. I believe Mr. Aizawa will be there. That of course will be mostly Japanese, but in case anybody speaks Japanese or understands it, then definitely check that one out. We'll post about it as well. So yeah, thank you very much again. And it is it's a real pleasure to be working on the Tokyo scoring series, I guess now we can call it together. There's so many questions. There's one last request of, can you make a demo with TSS and some of your other libraries? No pressure. You can. Here, you have professional work to do. Of course, if you do one, we can post it. And I will make sure, by the way, chat, I will make sure to post. I will get a link. I will find a link to the textbook. We'll do the research. We'll find a place where people in the West can buy it. So we'll figure it out. Yes. So, arigatou gozaimasu. Thank you for participating. I'll say good night for now, and thank you everybody for coming. And please, check out our Discord, because we are on there daily. If you have any problems with Tokyo scoring strings, any requests, you want to talk about future projects, we'll be there. So, thank you so much. Have a good rest of your night, everybody. Taka, Ryoko, Yukihiro. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye now.
Thank you. ありがとうございました。
All right. Have a good night, everybody. Sleep well. Enjoy Tokyo scoring strings.